Welcome, welcome.
Thank y'all for being here. Today we are talking about politics in the Black relationship.
So today we're going to be talking about what's in the headlines, basically the political battle, how that's relevant to us as Black people, what lessons we can draw from it. So we're going to be talking all about that, and we're also going to be talking about how relationships function as an indicator for our political reality.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times we like to think of those two things as separate.
We do.
But what we're going to be doing is showing those areas of overlap, those intersections between how we engage in relationships and our political orientation, our political positions.
Right. Hey, Miss Jada, thank you for being here. So, it's really a topic that needs to be talked about. We see a lot of people talking about politics, but they're not really connecting it to relationships. And in this video, you're going to learn how we can't separate the two and how important they are to the health of our relationships.
Right.
So before we jump in, thank y'all for coming in. We'll give y'all a few more minutes before we actually start. But who are we? We are Bami and Naila, and we are the founders of Indivisible Trust. Indivisible Trust is essentially a platform where we are giving advice, giving guidance, coaching Black people in relationships, how to scale their relationships to new heights.
Yes. So in the Indivisible Trust, we like to talk about what we call high-value relationships. So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, what are our relationships missing? What is that blockage that's preventing us to elevate ourselves to the next level?
Right.
And that's not just in terms of intimacy, in terms of communication, but also politics. Because politics is a reflection of the level of intimacy that we have in our relationship. Meaning, if you're not close with your partner, that's usually going to show up in political conflict. So in Indivisible Trust, as relationship investors, we help people become more clear on where they stand in all the realms of life.
Right.
Not just in the terms of the household, but also in the social space. Because the social and the personal, those two things come together as well.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you're not partner, your politics is also going to be different than when you are partner. So this all is connected, and we do give guidance to people seeking to be in relationships, people married, or people preparing to have a healthier relationship. We give we hit on all those sectors, no matter what season you are in. So let's go ahead and hop into the topic for today. But first, before we jump in, we want you to remind us we want to give you something very important at the end. So if you stay to the end, we're going to give you our
big reveal.
So to speak, as far as what this election is going to look like and the end result of the election. Okay.
Yes.
So if you stay to the end, you'll get to hear our take on that.
Yes.
Go ahead.
So basically, what we're trying to highlight is that amongst Black men and women, there's a gender war, and this gender war is spilling over into our political lives. So first off, we want to acknowledge that the gender war hasn't always been happening. This is, we feel, a product of social engineering. So a lot of times when you see Black women going at Black men or Black men going at Black women, this has been manufactured hostility.
Right.
And what we're noticing now is that hostility is now being reflected in the political space, where you have candidates advertising themselves to the public as symbols of Black women are symbols of masculinity, are symbols of manhood. And whenever you have the political divide stated in that way, it's going to have negative effects on the most vulnerable people in that population.
Absolutely.
And the people who have the least amount of power.
Exactly.
And when we're looking at Black America, this is a population that is sorely lacking in any type of organization, any type of power, any type of leverage. So it's important that we be very conscious of the messages we consume and how those messages are affecting how we relate to one another as men and women.
Right. And thank you for saying that, Baba, because really in this video, you probably are going to hear, no matter what side you're on, you're gonna hear things that may not make you feel the best, right? But these are the honest truths. These are realities that we have to face and we have to be discussing. And so this is all coming from a place of care and love for our people, love to see for our people to be in healthier relationship dynamics, political dynamics, better countries, better nations. So this is something that needs to be said, needs to be looked at on a deeper level, and we can't just look at things very surface level. This is not just an election. Okay, this is not just an election. This is an election that is different from any other election in American history.
Right.
Like, because it's an attack specifically on the dynamics of the black relationship. And we're going to get into that. And without looking at it from that angle, you're playing right into their hands.
Yes.
You see, like, you're playing right into the end outcome, which is destroying the black relationships, the black family.
Right. The unity between the black man and the black woman, that has always been the core of how we organize politically. So whenever anybody tries to drive a wedge between us, tries to divide us in the ways that the American system is, we have to understand that's not just a personal attack, that's a political attack.
Right.
So we should never look at, again, the political and the personal as separate.
Exactly.
They come from the same motivation, which is to disempower black people as a group.
Absolutely. We have Kim Ya on YouTube. She said, "I love your ministry. Keep blessing our people with your wisdom." Thank you so much. We appreciate you. So we're actually live on YouTube and Instagram. So if you see us looking in different directions, that's why.
Yes.
So yeah, Baba already touched on the gender war, right? And it's something that has been happening prior to the election, right? Really, since we've been here, it feels like the gender wars between black men and women have escalated, right, in a different space. And so really, let's go ahead and quote this quote right here, Baba, because this is about the wars, the gender wars and the political wars. Right.
So there's a famous quote, and the quote goes, it can be said that politics is war without bloodshed, while war is politics with bloodshed. Essentially what they're saying is, whenever you see a political campaign, understand that this is a form of war. Specifically with elections, the psychological war. So there's a very intense psychological war that's being waged right now by both the Democratic and Republican parties. And it's incumbent upon us to be aware of that, because if we understand what their war strategy is, we can develop a counter strategy. So it's important that war is politics war is politics with bloodshed, and politics is war without bloodshed.
Right. So when we talk about gender wars, that's politics.
That's politics.
That's politics.
Yeah.
So it's like, even when people say they don't talk about politics, like I don't discuss politics with coworkers, I don't discuss politics with friends or whatever, everything you do is your politics, right? And so when there's this clash between black men and women, that is political, and we're seeing it now on the global or in the national scale with this election. We're going to get into that. We have this video broken up into 3 sections, and so the first section we're going to talk about the political state and how this is really infiltrating our relationships. But that gender war that we were feeling, all these videos, all the manosphere, all the women that's calling men dusty, and like all of those sectors, they're now all merging, or not merging, they're all coming to the surface in the sense of like, this is what their politics are. And their politics are, the women who are calling the men dusty are going to vote for Kamala, and the men are leaning more to Trump. Right?
Or just not voting at all.
Or just not voting at all. They've just checked out of the whole system, right? And so this is what this video is going to really be delving into. Also, I know we said it already, but let's make sure we say it again, is you cannot separate the black relationship from politics. Any relationships. This goes for any ethnicity. Politics and relationships are one.
Yes, the politics grow out of the relationship.
Exactly.
Because when people take a political position, they're taking that position on behalf of the people they love and care about. Meaning, how are these policies going to affect the people that matter to me most?
Exactly.
So it's not just the marital relationship. It's also parent-child. It's elder youth. It's any relationship that you can think of within a community. Those relationships are being basically tested whenever we have an election. And
Yeah.
you get to really see the integrity of these relationships based on how each group acts
Right.
at the time. So, meaning if you see black people at this very conflictual relationship, what that's telling us is our communities are in a state of crisis. Because, again, the political agendas, they're always testing what is the integrity of your community, what is the integrity of your relationships.
Yep.
Yeah.
Earthly Medium, she said family is our first weapon for war. Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
That's an African wisdom.
Listen.
Yeah, so all family is the core of all our political power.
So by attacking us individually, that's attacking our family because we're not individuals.
Right.
You see? So when they speak to us directly and they don't speak to my husband and they don't speak to his wife, they're literally dividing us without saying it. Okay, so let's go ahead and hop into the first section of what we want to talk about.
Yeah, so first we want to talk about voting and the political climate. And the first point we want to make is that voting is a way black people assert their citizenship, and in parentheses we have their existence. So what does this mean? So essentially, since slavery was abolished, at least legally, because we still have slavery in prisons, there was this glorification of voting as the indicator of your citizenship and also an indicator of the value of your existence. Meaning America has this habit of restricting our worldview to the point where we can only envision having power within the American system. And the only way we can express that power within the American system, at least we think, is through voting. So we've ended up in a situation where we've put so much mental investment in voting, but we haven't really paused to think, okay, is the vote or is the election process, is it speaking to my interests or is it speaking to the interests of my enemies?
Right.
And because we haven't asked that question, we've ended up giving all of our political capital to the enemies of black people, and it's reflected in the disunity that we see in black relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, so we're not coming on here telling black people not to vote because we already know black people and their relationship with voting is emotional. So you can't get black people to not vote by telling them not to vote and that it doesn't matter. Like, they don't care. It's an emotional thing. So we're not even coming here to tell you not to vote or even who to vote for. We're just coming to tell you what's going to happen and what is happening because of the investment that we're giving when we vote.
Right.
I also have to remember that a vote is your consent, right? It's a form of consent. It's a way of covertly getting you to consent to the nation and whatever the nation is. So if the nation is run by psychopaths and evil people, when you go and vote, even if your intentions are not evil and spiteful or all those things, you are consenting spiritually to something, right? And so it's very important that we don't make these emotional, gestures when it comes to voting. Like I said, I'm not here to tell you not to do it because I already know you go do it. So now that you're going to do it, so now that we know you're going to do it, we just want you to know what's happening as you're doing it, okay? Right. And so the citizenship, this idea of citizenship, for them, the black people don't feel like citizens unless they can vote. They're like, well, how can I prove that I'm a citizen here unless I exercise my right to vote, right? And so a lot of this is insecurity. This need to feel a part of the nation is so deep in black people. And so this is why most people are going to vote, even if they don't like either candidate. That doesn't matter, right? You don't have to like the candidate. The fact of the matter is I need to put my vote in because me going to the ballot and putting who I vote for makes me feel like I'm a part of the nation.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So voting has basically come this form of idolatry.
Yeah.
Where we're not really thinking about what is the end point, but we're just thinking there's some intrinsic value, even if the outcome is never in our favor.
Yes.
And you also see this idolatry show up just in the election process with these celebrities.
Yes.
The celebrity endorsements. This is all ways of shaping public opinion. Because one of the interesting things about elections is we're taught to think that elections are politicians responding to public opinion. That's not the case. Elections is politicians shaping public opinion.
Yes.
Meaning they tell you what to think, and then based on what they tell you, you do what they say. So whenever we see these policy platforms or we see these rallies and speeches, understand these tactics aren't designed to appeal to you; they're designed to manipulate you.
Manipulate.
You know, and once we are able to
Both
discern
sides.
the difference between an honest appeal and tactics of manipulation, we can position ourselves from a point of power as a point of reaction.
Yes.
Because right now we're very reactionary
Yes.
in how we deal with our politics.
And they know we're reacting, right? This is
Yeah.
why they can give us Megan the horses and put them
Yeah.
on stage, because they know we're going to react, right? We're not going to think, we're not going to analyze, we're going to react. And
Right.
it's really important that we don't do that, because our relationships are going to suffer.
Right.
Are suffering when we react that way, right? And so Kamala's campaign is an example that black women are living in a state of delusion. Deep delusion. So she was able, and I saw a lot of black women, they were insulted that she brought Megan the horse on the stage. But at this point, it's like we've invited this on ourselves. Right? Because who put Megan the horse on the pedestal anyway?
Right. Why is she known?
Why is she known?
Yeah.
And so a lot of this is accountability on us as black women. We have to go back and say, it's a slap in the face, but who gave the person the hand in the first place to slap us with? Right? And so Kamala is only speaking to black women. If you look at her campaigns, if you look at all the things she says, if you look at even articles when they call her by name or call her what she is, they'll call her a black woman. They call her a black woman Asian American.
Right. So they're separating her black womanhood out from her other identifiers, because they're saying the way we can get the public, make basically black women to vote for her, is we have to constantly, through repetition, say black woman, black woman, black woman. Even if the word order is awkward, it's important that they squeeze the black woman, those two words together.
Those two words together are very important.
Because once you get them to think black woman, you're supposed to think, oh, she's just like me. Even though she's married to a white man, even though she went to school in Canada, even though, she
locks up black men.
She locks up black men and punishes black women who aren't able to get their children to school.
Right.
So I think we have to be aware that, again, these are tactics of manipulation, not an honest appeal.
No, it's not an honest appeal at all. And they're appealing to that insecurity in black women, wanting to be seen, wanting to feel recognized, wanting to feel like they can come in and save the nation. They're playing on that, right? And so it's very important that when we go into any space and we're casting any type of vote and we're giving energy to something, it has to serve our families, not just us, right? Because if they're just speaking to us, they're not serving us.
Right.
Because I am not me. I am my family.
Right.
Okay? And so this whole, ignoring of the black man on her campaign is very deliberate, right? We know she doesn't value black men. That's why she married one. It's very simple. But they're using a lot of our insecurities as a people. And they do this with every election. The difference between this election and other elections is there's more single women and single men than ever.
Right.
Black men and women. Most times, whenever the election comes, you have a lot more families, right? But we've had an enormous amount of divorces since the last election. We've had an enormous amount of propaganda telling us to be single, telling us to leave our spouses. We have the manosphere, we have the woman sphere, we have the high value woman where she don't need a man. We've had a lot of things that we've been through since the last election that has caused us to not be in relationships right now. And when you're dealing and you're going into an election where there's people that are chronically single, the politics is different. The politics is very, very different, and this is why this particular election outcome is going to be a lot more damaging than previous outcomes in elections with the black community, because we're not in relationships.
Right. And that relationship, what it was supposed to be, was a barrier, almost like a filter.
Yes.
So whenever a politician would put a policy forward, you could put it through that filter of how is this going to affect my husband?
Yep.
How is this going to affect my wife?
Yep.
How is this going to affect my children?
Yep.
But if you tailor the policies to speak only to one section of the minority demographic, then that becomes a tactic of manipulation, because they're denying that the black woman's life is impacted in many different angles by the other people around her. You know, to the point that you're not even speaking to her unless you're also speaking to her family.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
And so there's an ignorance, ignoring of the black family, and this is even reflected in her campaign ads. So if you look at Kamala HQ, that's her Instagram, and you look at the ad, there's no black men in the ad.
No.
Not one. But you have gay people, you have white people, you have black women, but you have no black men. So black men have become either politically irrelevant or enemies. Politically irrelevant or enemies.
Yes, and she's speaking directly to single black women, right? Because married black women, some of them might vote for Kamala just because it's just the Democratic Party is just who black people are conditioned to vote for. But she's really not speaking to married black women.
No.
That are married to black men, because she ain't married to a black man. This is why Obama was able to speak to people better, even though he's just as irrelevant and useless as a president. But he was able to speak because he had a black family. Right. So when black people looked at him, they was like, I have a black wife. He has a black wife. The black woman was like, I have a black husband. She has a black husband. So, and we have black children. So there was a connection. This woman has, not only does she not have a black husband, she has no children. She has no black children.
None.
What we have to talk about?
Right. How can somebody who's single in her, I don't know how old she's not single, but childless at that age. Yeah. She isn't even familiar with the responsibilities of motherhood that someone who actually went through pregnancy, childbirth, and that type of process. So again, these are things to show how the family order and the political order are always one and the same.
And this is why Trump's campaign and his following is so fanatical, right? Because he's speaking to the white family.
Yes.
He's speaking to the white family.
Yes.
He knows how to speak to the family, and the families know how to respond when they hear someone that values family.
Yes, because that's where their psychological center is.
Right.
It's not in themselves. It's in their family. And you see this divide between Republicans and Democrats shown in the mental health crisis.
Let's talk about it, Bob.
So studies have shown, and you can find these online, that when it comes to mental illness, it's disproportionately present in liberal white women, Democratic white women. Yeah. According to one study, 56% of liberal white women have reported that their doctor diagnosed them with a mental illness. And the age group was between 18 and 29. So young liberal white women lead above all other demographics as mentally ill. And this means schizophrenia, PTSD, depression, bipolar disorder, anxiety, suicidal thoughts,
postpartum depression.
And when you're looking at these democratic platforms, who you think is modeling, who do you think is creating these democratic platforms? The mentally ill white women who are trying to convince you that your psychological center isn't in your family, but it's in yourself. So you talk about bodily autonomy, but you don't talk about family autonomy.
Why are we talking about?
You see, so you can talk about the right to limit the size of the family, but you're not talking about how can I expand my family? Right. How can I expand my family so I can increase my prosperity?
Right.
So understand the democratic agenda is birthed from a space of mental illness.
Mental illness.
And this isn't to exonerate the Republican agenda.
No, they mentally ill
That's also birthed from a place of mental illness. But what we're saying is that when you look at the black population, they're more captive to the Democratic agenda than the Republicans. So it's our responsibility to call it out.
And there's levels to insanity, right? They're both insane, but the Democrat is much more insane than the Republican.
Yes.
Because the Republican understands the value of the family, right?
Yes.
They still white, so it's only so much sanity they can have. But if you had to pick between the two, the Republican is saner, period.
And they're saner because they're racist.
Yes.
That sounds crazy, right? How can you be sane if you hate people?
No.
Because any race that's sane is going to think of itself as superior to other races. You may not actually be superior, but that's how you survive as a race. You have to think you're superior. And if you think you're equal, that's basically admitting inferiority.
And that's what the Democratic Party does. Equality. Equality to what?
Yes. Who? While they're living lives that's reminding them they're unequal, they're telling you that you're equal.
Absolutely.
So they're starting from a position of powerlessness and helplessness where they're always the victim. And they can't say, okay, I'm going to fight back.
Right.
I'm going to hit my enemies. I'm not going to try to morally appeal to my enemies.
Right.
I'm going to hit them.
And the moral appeal doesn't work when you're dealing with saner people. This is why the Republican doesn't care if you vote for them.
They have force.
They still like you still the op. They don't care that you got a Trump hat on.
Yeah.
You still the op.
Yes.
Because they understand genetically you're a threat.
Yes.
I don't care if you're my friend.
Yes.
Genetically you're a threat.
And you're a threat whether you want to admit it or not. That's just the nature of things.
Right. So if you're just joining us, we are talking about political relations between black women and black men in this specific climate of the election 2024 and how it's affecting how we relate to one another. And it is really a turning point in the black relationship. Like, I don't think people understand how, if you, on the other side of this election, if you are already single or you are, if you're single, like,
you're the prey.
You're the prey.
Yeah.
And it's going to be harder for you, even harder for you in the climate of America, if you're single, to get into a relationship based on what they are pushing onto black people. They're pushing them to choose a side, and that side doesn't have any room to compromise with the other side, right? And part of relationships is constant compromise. So if they're telling you, if they're removing the compromise from the table, they're essentially saying that they don't want you in relationships. There's no value of a black man and a black woman being together, right? And we've been saying this. They've been pushing propaganda on us for a minute now to be single, and now we see in this election what that's coming out to be.
So now we're going to address part 2, which is on relationships. So we gave you a picture of the political climate. How is this political climate impacting how we practice relationships?
Right.
Well, one is a statement we've already made, which is that the political climate always has an impact on the relationship, whether directly or indirectly. Politics is testing what do you care about, what is the vision, what is the shared vision, because every relationship has a vision.
Right.
Sometimes the vision is in conflict with one another, and other times it's united.
Right.
And the politics is basically bringing that to the surface. Whatever your vision is for the future of the nation you live in, that is being tested in the political arena in the election season.
Yeah.
So one of our viewers says, I've definitely determined that if I ever want to see a healthy marriage here, I should go find him in an African country. Yeah, and not just find it in an African country, but you also have to detox of the Western ideas of what a marriage is.
Yeah.
And because in Africa, the marriage is always about not the man and the woman specifically, but it's about the two families coming together. And we find that because a lot of the politics, at least the democratic politics especially, are built on this idea of individualism, your personal desires as opposed to the family interest, it's very hard to bring that into the conversation about marriage.
Yeah.
But that's what we're here for. We're here to push the traditional concept, not the Republican concept, because Republicans like to say that they are the family values party. They just know how to speak the rhetoric of family values. Yeah. But the real family values is here on the African continent.
Exactly. And that's what Indivisible Trust is. Like, we're giving you the blueprint, giving you formulas and guides to really uproot this idea of what marriages and relationships are, and give you a new foundation so that when you do find your future husband or your future wife, you know how to sustain that relationship. Because people meet great people all the time and they can't sustain the relationship because for them they have a very fairy tale like idea of what relationships are, and fairy tales do not work in real life marriages. It just doesn't work. And so we really need a new foundation to give our relationships, and that's what Indivisible Trust essentially is. So now we already said we're going into the second part. The conflict between black men and women is being aggravated by the current political climate. Yes,
and we talked about this. Basically, you can see it in the imagery, meaning the absence of black men, but the emphasis on black woman in the exclusion of any other black anything.
Yes.
Like, it's no black men, it's no black children, it's no black elders, it's no black...
Just the woman. Just the black woman only.
Yeah, just the woman.
And that's a direct attack.
Yeah, so they're isolating, and this is how predators operate. When a predator wants to seek a prey, what they do is they pull the prey, they lure it away from the pack.
Yep.
Lured away from the protector.
You
the
don't
protector,
need him.
which is the man.
He's not. He's
you
not
don't need the man.
providing. He's not providing. He's dusty.
He's dusty.
He doesn't have the money to sustain you. Like they've given, and like I said, this has been given to us even before the election season started. We've been hearing these things, and so now when the election season come and they said, "Oh, Kamala's running," black women instantly went into a trance.
Yes,
and they was like, because they cue the Beyonce music, cue all the hoes that got all these music about how they don't mess with men, cue the music, and it was an automatic. Like now they in the trance, and now speaking to them and try to get them to come out of that, it don't even make sense at this point. Just let them do it, right? And that's why I said, wait to the end. We're gonna tell you what is gonna happen, right? Because getting them out of it at this point it's unlikely. But we just want you to know, if you're in it, this is what the fate of yourself, the fate of your relationships, and the fate of your nation is gonna be. Because
essentially, what the Kamala campaign is doing is implanting a heavy dose of false pride. And false pride is
so dangerous.
False pride is a drug to powerless people. False pride is a drug to powerless people, because what false pride does is it gives the person who's consuming it the impression that they have more power than they
actually do.
Meaning they don't actually have to deal with the person who's oppressing them. They can just live their life blissfully as though that oppressor isn't there. You know, so when you have black children being kidnapped and trafficked and murdered, and we can't have any recourse, when you have CPS taking the children of black women
dying in
you have black women dying in the hospital in labor, you have all these medical malpractice incidents happening against black women. This is not the picture of a group that's powerful, but they do have protectors, and are they the protectors for the black woman should be. But it's an agenda to remove the protector, the black man.
And one of the ways they did that was by telling us that the man's only use is to provide. His first use is to protect. But they don't care about protection, right? They threw that out the window and said, "But can he provide?" But on the continent, women and men provide.
And when we say protect, what we mean is physically violating white people. That's what we mean. Violence against white people.
The people that are harming
Meaning black women should be encouraging black men to violently attack their boss. Violently attack the white men who are working overtime to try to make their life unlivable. That's what should be happening in an orderly political environment. But what you have is black men are being violated by white people, and then at the same time, black women are being propagandized not to care, or at least to think of the black men as politically irrelevant, to the point where the only time you can say their name is if they're dead. But when they're alive, they're not being challenged to politically invest in the future of the black collective.
Or the black man is being effeminate and he's frolicking through wildflowers, and women are like, "I love seeing joyful black men
on the White House lawn in a dress." You see,
that's when the black woman now is like,
that's beautiful, right? Like we frolicking, right? But if we like trying to threaten the life of our enemies, too far. Be quiet. That's not, you're going to get us all in trouble.
Right. You see? So it's very important that we as women understand that we're being used as a weapon against our men. Kamala is a weapon against black men, and any black woman that gets behind her, whether she's married or not, she is a weapon to black men. And a lot of black men are feeling this, right? So I feel we believe, and you can put in the chat if you're a black man watching this, how do you feel at this point? Because I'm sure you're not really for Kamala, and I'm sure you're not also either for Trump. You probably just feel like it's no point to vote, right?
And what does that say about the nation you live in, where they can have an election and you don't even see any option that's attractive to you? Maybe it's a sign you don't belong in that nation.
Maybe.
It's not just a sign you shouldn't vote, because I was once in that position.
Be both.
It would be an election, and I would look at the candidates and I'd be like, I don't like neither one of them. That means the nation wasn't designed for you. And then the next question is, well, why are you in that nation?
So it's like black men, they're being silenced, and so are black children, because Trump or Kamala, they ain't speaking to black children, right? So the black child is not centered. The black man is irrelevant. The only person that's being spoken to is the black woman. So, and it kind of makes sense in the sense for the Democrats, because a lot of black men are in prison, and even the black men who are out, some of them may not even have the record to be able to vote. So for them, they're like, why focus on them? I'm gonna just speak to the black woman, but not realize how you gonna win with just the black woman's vote.
Yeah.
How you gonna do that?
Or they just don't see their interests reflected in the narrative of these political figures. So Kamala, she isn't talking about like jobs. I don't think like raising black male employment.
She doesn't even
lowering black male unemployment. You know, that's
she doesn't even say the word black man. She doesn't say that term.
No, it's
like that doesn't
word.
leave her mouth because
you mean convicts?
Right.
That's what she would call.
Right. You mean the ones that locked up? Those? Oh, they're not a factor. And so for me, if you're not speaking to my husband, then you ain't talking to me. What is it to talk? Or if you're a single woman, if you're not speaking to my future black husband, what do we have to talk about?
Yeah.
Because you're an enemy to him. I don't care if you're a black woman.
Yeah.
What does that have to do with me?
Yeah.
You're an enemy to my husband. You're an enemy to my children.
Yeah.
And so, and Trump, he's an enemy too. And so this is why it's like, at this point, black people feel like they have to choose between two enemies,
yeah.
And they're gonna choose because of what we said earlier. Because voting is an emotional. They have an emotional relationship with it, and just telling them that vote for bad is not enough. That's just the reality. It's not enough for them to really say, "All right, I need to make a real decision." Right? Not a voting decision. I need to make a life decision about where I want my life to live, where I want to have the rest of my life be carried out at. Because this is not sustainable. And
right.
Yeah.
So the next point we want to make is that black people must develop their political identities within. Emphasis on within their relationships and not before them. This lowers the chance of conflict.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Are we saying that before you're in a relationship you should not have a political perspective? No, because I had a political perspective
and
before,
I did too.
And Mama Jahi, she had a political perspective. But what we're saying is your investment or how serious you are about that political perspective is tested once you enter the relationship. And what happens is things that were impractical start to fall away.
Yeah.
And things that are practical start to come to the surface.
Right.
So when you enter into a relationship, what that's doing is that it's maturing your political consciousness. Because it's getting you to think about someone other than yourself and then thinking about your lineage, thinking about your family. And a lot of times with black people, what we find is that we have these political ideologies, but they haven't been matured because we haven't been in a serious relationship enough for us to challenge our political thoughts. So, for example, before I was in a relationship, I say I would identify as left wing, just left wing. Okay, I believe in socialism, taking over the means of production, blah, 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 blah. European ideology.
When I was just a Democrat.
She was just a Democrat, right? When she is just a Democrat. That's a lot of black people.
Right.
You know, so that's
right.
But when I got into a relationship, what I found out was I need to have a position on the African family. And I noticed the literature that I was reading by all these white authors giving me the intricacies of political philosophy, they never said anything about the African family. So I need to be more practical about my politics because I can't save my family and feed my family reading about Karl Marx. Not you see, I can't save and feed my family reading about any type of political philosopher from the 1800s. That's interesting to think about, but my survival, my livelihood is based on my ability to connect with my ancestors. All right, and my ancestry can be accessed through study, through historical memory, and then it can be, my bloodline can be prolonged based on what I do. Not on what I read, but what I do. So we have to become a people who are investing in doing rather than thinking. Yeah. And rather than just taking positions because of the emotional payoff. Okay, because it might feel emotionally good to invest in certain these candidates and these ideologies, but when it comes down to it, we always have to ask, what is this doing to protect and expand my family
and my relationship
and my people's welfare?
Yeah.
You know, who are my people, and are we doing things on behalf of them?
Right.
You know?
Right. And your politics evolves, and once you get together. So, like you said, we had different approaches to things, but now we're very on the same accord.
Yeah.
Like for us, we matured together, and our politics evolved as we matured, which is how we were even able to get to the continent, right? That takes being on the same page politically.
Yes.
Right? You can't be like, I don't know, or I'm not sure. Like, we literally matured together. Yes. And what's happened in past elections is a lot of black couples, they were willing to compromise. Right, so the man might have been more like, I kind of wanted to vote for this person, and the woman was like, I kind of like this person. But when you're in a marriage, you compromise. And so this is really what this gender wars has told us to get rid of. Like, no more compromise. Like, if you're not getting everything that you want, then you need to throw him to the wolves. Right. And if she's not giving you everything you want from her, throw her to the wolves. Right. So now this whole compromise is out the door. Right? And when you don't have compromise, you don't have relationships. You just got chronic singlehood. You just got people that just sleep with each other, and then that's it. Like, there's no commitment. There's no long-term vision. And this is what we're seeing with the black community connected to politics.
Yes. And it's basically saying your political power is in your ability to separate from the family.
Right.
To have an issue that only speaks to you, but doesn't address what the impact of your decision is on the family.
Right, and when you are not on one accord, you have a heightened, you're more heightened for a conflict. Conflict resolution now goes out the window, and this is why in Indivisible Trust, we have to teach our clients how to solve conflicts, how to get creative, because a lot of times politically, they're on different pages. And they've just been able to kind of like tiptoe around it. But now this election is not happening. Like, this election is forcing you to choose a side. And there is no like teetering on the edge of it. And so if you want to minimize conflict within your relationship, you understand that we can't divorce politics from our relationships. So this is the next point, Robert.
So when we allow relationships to shape our politics, it becomes more protected.
You kind of said that.
So, and secondly, the dysfunction in black relationships leads us to support agendas that disempower us. And basically, empowerment politically always comes out of unity. Whenever you have unity among a people, the political positions that they take typically benefit them.
Yes.
Because that unity, what it does is it gives them a certain amount of momentum and force.
Yes.
So that when they pursue a goal, they can accomplish it with relative ease.
Yeah.
Because there's not a lot of bickering and infighting within the group.
Yes.
But whenever you have disunity, that creates space for co-optation. It creates space from disempowerment. You make yourself more vulnerable to predators.
Isolation.
We
talked about that.
Your mental illness, because now you're putting your sensor. You're building a social vision without the society.
Yep.
You see, like, you're building a social vision without the family. So what we're arguing here is that the way we heal ourselves politically is we first have to heal our relationships. And once we heal our relationships, then whatever political position we take, we can pursue that vision, and then we can actually accomplish it because we're moving together.
And this is why the Republicans are able to rally in the way they are. Not because they're
united.
They're just united. Like, and they understand the importance of at least the overt display of unity. In their homes, they're very disunited, but they understand that we can't show that. We have to be very intentional about showing a united front. And black people, we just don't understand that. We just don't understand it, and it's really disempowering us. And so the unity is like the electricity to get us what we say we need. Without it, we're just extension cords without anything to be plugged into.
Right.
We need that unity to give us that spark. And what they're doing at this point is they're talking to us as if we have electricity. We ain't got no electricity in the house, and you coming and bringing us all these extension cords, giving us all these TVs, giving us all these things, and we literally don't have no electricity in the house. And they know it. And so for them, it's just about, look, I'm bringing you all these things, right? But they know we don't even have the tools to do anything with it.
Yeah, we have no leverage.
We have no leverage. Let's talk about leverage.
Yes, and leverage, there's, so if people who study like political science, there's 3 forms of leverage. So you got positive leverage, you got negative leverage, and then you have what's called like coercion. All right, that's like bullying, threats, violence. So positive leverage is when you have something that your opponent wants and you do an exchange. You say, so I have oil, you have weapons. I give you oil, you give me weapons.
Right.
That's the example of positive leverage. Negative leverage, this is when you basically withhold
Like
something from your enemy. So boycotting, protesting, any type of divestment campaign, this falls under negative leverage. And what you find is that with black people, we've always relied on that negative leverage.
Right.
Basically, look at the civil rights movement. That was boycotting, that was withholding participation in the system. But the problem with negative leverage is that it has no real internal power. It's only based on your ability not to participate. It's a passive way. It's a very passive way to exercise power. And what we're arguing is that in order for us to truly understand our potential, we have to graduate from negative leverage to more positive leverage. Meaning we should have something that will actually be exchangeable, something of value that we can then hold to ourselves, and other people would then be forced to deal with us with more respect.
Yes, but if they know you don't have any leverage and they don't know you don't have any of those assets, then they can pretend and talk to you like they think you do, but they know you don't. So there's really no reason for them to ever give you what you want. There's really no reason for them to do anything outside of just string you along to get your little vote, and then that's it. And we see it every election.
Yeah. And one way you can harness positive leverage is through unity. Because what unity signifies? Unity, I would say unity is to the political space what intimacy is to the relationship space. What is intimacy in relationships? Intimacy is closeness. And the more closeness you have, the more what information sharing you have, the more knowledge you have of each other. And then the more protected you are as a relationship because the investment is much deeper.
Yeah.
Likewise, when you have unity in the political space, that signifies closeness between multiple families. Closeness amongst people over a vast space, and geographically, any type of divisions, those divisions are put beneath that fundamental unity on the level of shared history and shared vision.
Yes.
So, and because we don't have the unity, we're very easy to exploit. So one of the ways you can create an environment of positive leverage is we have to work on unity, but the unity begins in our relationships. Meaning black men loving black women and black women loving black men. As long as that's not flowing, we'll never have any political future.
And anytime any politician speaks to you, they're speaking to you knowing that you don't have that unity, knowing you don't have that leverage, and the pandering starts. Because it's not just everybody panders to black people. It's not just Kamala. Anybody that speaks to black people panders to them because they know that they don't have anything of use. That's just the reality. And so we have to make ourselves useful again. And the longer you look back in history, we were more useful because we were married. We were in relationships. We had families to care about and to raise. And now that we have women that are chronically single, men that are chronically single, people who don't even want to be in relationships, people who are single parent households, now the leverage is in the negatives, extra in the negatives. And then what's the third form of leverage?
So the third form was coercion. That's violence. That's blackmail. That's bribery. And this is, by the way, probably the principal form of leverage that white people have used against us. Violence, terrorism, bribery, blackmailing, nepotism. These are all considered forms of leverage that are more hidden, but I would argue the most effective when you're in a Western society.
Yeah, when you're dealing with people who don't have leverage.
Yes, which makes it even more insane that a lot of times the way we try to get leverage is through the negative means. Because one of the negative ways of getting leverage is trying to morally appeal. That's another form of leverage I didn't mention is black people often try to get leverage through moral persuasion. Basically by trying to appeal to the religion, trying to appeal to the idea of a shared humanity, the need for equality,
the gender. Sometimes they'll just be like, forget the race, let's just connect on the gender.
What they call identity politics. And what we have to understand is when you're using the leverage of moral persuasion with the people who have already chosen coercion, terrorism, blackmail, bribery as their form of leverage, you're always going to lose that battle.
Always. Because you like speaking to a brick wall.
Yeah, you're
like,
always going to lose
the
that
brick
battle.
wall has already made a decision that it's never going to respond to you.
Right.
It's like,
and the bribery is in the open now, because
Yeah.
you just look at how much money is being poured into these political campaigns.
Yeah.
And it's not to get a candidate elected as much as it is to control the electorate.
Yes.
To control the minds of the electorate.
Yes.
That's the purpose of an election.
period.
You know, there's one agenda, and that agenda, it doesn't depend on who the president is. It depends on who the people who control the minds of the people
Yes.
is. Meaning the people who put money into the election, that's who wins the election. So once we are able to see beyond the surface, the Democrat-Republican divide, and see, okay, there's a deeper enemy, and that enemy's goal is to control our minds, and then use voting as a cover to seize that control.
Yeah.
Then we can disengage and form a united bloc, and then make the right decision moving forward.
It's so crazy too, because I remember it was a post and they were like, Melinda Gates gave Kamala Harris like 52 million or something, and it
Yeah.
was people who were in support of Kamala sharing it. But I'm like, but doesn't that mean, like, if someone is giving 52 million,
Yes.
why do you think that you have given that has given no millions? Why do you think your vote back? Like,
Yeah,
that's why I'm like,
52 million votes. Like, actually, it's worth more than 52 million votes.
yes, this means that this is not a vote type of thing.
Yes.
This is how much money do you have, and
That's bribery.
that's bribery.
That's bribery.
And
So,
but black people, because we're so emotionally connected to her winning, we would share things that literally highlight the fact that it doesn't matter if you vote.
and she's taking the bribes in the open. You see, no other country, by the way, does
No,
this.
no, it's
I
illegal.
promise in Tanzania, there will never be a report of somebody receiving, 500 million T shillings, for their election. That will never, or however much, 1 billion T shillings for their election. That will never happen.
And if it leaked out, it would be like a leak. Like, oh my God, it came out.
Yeah, it
that
came out.
It
It'll
wouldn't
be a
be
scandal.
like, I received.
Yeah.
Like, what?
So we're operating in a space, again, this is just political, a space where the rules in terms of how they negotiate power are very different from what we think. And part of us educating ourselves is knowing what those rules are.
Yes.
And once we know what those rules are, we won't be so enthusiastic about participating, because we'll see how useless, and how our presence is basically a form of submission.
Right.
Our presence, our participation, this is a form of submission. It's a spiritual contract.
It's a spiritual contract. And RN on YouTube, she said, I will never vote for her or any of them. Yeah. And so it's like, but most black people are they're gonna choose. Not because they feel like Kamala is better or Trump is better, but because they feel that they have to pick.
Yes.
And them not picking is showing that they don't have trust in the society that they live in. And
How do you live in a society you don't trust in?
right.
And here's the thing, you can't, which is why you probably shouldn't be in that society.
Yes, yes. And so black relationships are suffering now more than ever because we're not united politically. We get online and all we see is negative images, negative affirmations over the opposite sex. Our children are not centered. We have phrases like "F them kids." You see, so this is really been a simmering pot, right, for
It's
some
boiling
time.
over now.
But now it's about to boil over. And now, if you are in a relationship, you are going to it's going to be tested more than it was prior. If you're not in a relationship, it's going to be harder to get into a relationship because in your mind, your politics are already set in stone. Meaning, if you a black woman and you voted for Kamala and you meet a man that say he didn't vote, now you done.
Yeah,
like
you a
you're
hottie
done.
for Harris.
You're a hottie for Harris, right? You're done. Or if he voted for Trump, which some black men are doing because Trump is speaking to the protective nature.
They think that's where their manhood is.
At least they think that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
But if a black man has to choose between Kamala and Trump, a lot of them, if they're not in relationships with black women, they're gonna choose Trump.
Yeah. And look at all these rappers who are giving Trump these kind of gestures of approval.
Yes.
That's significant because what it's showing is a shift in consciousness amongst black men.
Amongst black
because
men.
it used to be that we would only vote in ways that we knew the women was on the same page because we didn't want to jeopardize the integrity of the family. But as the family breaks down, now we have no incentive. It's like we can just vote for Republicans now because the women don't care about us anyway. They hate us anyway. And a lot of men sincerely feel that women hate them, and there isn't enough of a pushback in terms of the public space in the media to dispel that notion. And now the political officials are taking advantage of that narrative and amplifying it. Everything that becomes political, it first starts out as fashionable. Because it was fashionable for a while, but now it's political.
We would go as far as to say that the political campaign started when they started doing the gender wars. Like, the political campaign doesn't start the year of the election. That would be crazy. They spent too much time and too much energy and too much money to just say we're going to start on January 1, 2024. No, like, they've been propagandizing black people specifically to either divest completely or choose a side, right? Choose a side.
Afro Flower Child says, all Kamala is running on is for black women to kill their children too. So that's a very important point to make, because on this topic of abortions, remember, this is a Western policy option. So meaning any African country, this is not even on the political agenda because family has intrinsic value. So for African people, we're thinking of children as wealth. So
that is our wealth.
So even having that on the agenda, it clashes very sharply with our basic African sense. But when you take a black person out of their natural environment and plant them in the middle of a Western cesspool, then you can advertise anything as politically negotiable. That would be taboo in an African society. So I agree. That's one of the things that, again, highlights how Kamala Harris, despite any declarations of her blackness, no matter how many AKA marches she does, no matter how many times
pearls she got on,
no matter how many times she ski-wees at Howard University, she is not there for the interests of African people, African descendant people. She is not there for the interests of African people.
Neither one of them
I mean, but Trump is obvious. It's a white man. We don't have to prove that a white man doesn't have the interests of black people in mind. But when you have a so-called black woman saying she has the black women's interest in mind, and she's coming out to Beyonce and Megan Thee Stallion, and she's saying they not like us, and she's making all these references to black culture, HBCUs, and so all of that's creating a climate of misinformation and propaganda.
Right. A lot of this is just political laziness. Meaning we don't want to be innovative in finding our own solutions. They give us the solutions, they put them on the table, and they say these are your options, and because we're politically lazy, we have to choose between those two options. But people who are innovative and politically are actually empowered and are invested in unifying the black family, they say, I'm gonna move these options you just gave me off the table. These are not options. These are not options. These are not options, and I'm gonna create my own. Whether that means I'm leaving, whether that means whatever it looks like, being innovative, getting creative, right? But because we aren't unified, we're disempowered, and disempowered people don't get creative. Disempowered people don't get innovative because they're looking at you to give them the solutions, right? And a lot of this, that's why I said it's political laziness, and we have to be more intentional, especially as people who are under attack. We have to get intentional about finding the solutions, right? And creating our own reality, manifesting, building, seeking our own realities that align with what our values are.
So we're talking about sovereignty versus equality.
Absolutely.
Meaning sovereignty is always going to be better because you determine the options when you're sovereign.
I don't want equality.
When you want equality, you just want to participate in the same level of everybody else.
Exactly.
And that's not serving us.
Exactly.
So Crunchy Birth Coat says it's funny because none of this was going on before she was running for presidency. She wasn't for black people then. It's crazy because they know black people will vote for anyone who's black.
This is true.
That's especially if they're Democrat.
And this is what we said earlier. I don't know if you were here earlier, but we talked about how this is an emotional attachment, meaning we don't feel like we're actual citizens unless we can march to our local ballot and place our vote. And so for black people, because we're dealing with a deep insecurity, whether we love to be like, I love being black is lit, love blackity black, we say that, but deep down the reality is we are the most insecure people.
Yes. And we don't love ourselves enough to justify all this kind of self-congratulation you're seeing.
Right.
Because imagine if black people love themselves half as much as they say. Just half. Do you think that the number of black people would be killed, black children, let me revise. Do you think the number of black children would be killed and there wouldn't be one retaliatory killing? Not one. Do you think that the number of black children would be killed and there wouldn't even be statements by the parents of the killed children of vowing retaliation in killing the person who killed their child?
That happens in other countries, by the way.
That happens in other countries.
That's not crazy. It's not radical.
Yes.
It happens in other countries. Something happens to somebody's child. Nobody's like, oh my God, I can't believe he said he's going to retaliate.
Yes.
It's like...
And we know everybody isn't a killer, but you would think at the massive level that the killings against black children are happening, you would find one.
Yeah.
You would find one parent who wouldn't hire Benjamin Crump to come do a press conference. They would say, I don't need a press conference. I need a gun.
A press conference.
I need a gun. I need a knife. I need something to kill the police officer who killed my child. The fact that we haven't heard anybody say that, that's telling us that we don't really love ourselves.
No, we don't.
We actually hate ourselves, and then we're overcompensating by claiming we love ourselves during election season when Beyonce is playing and Megan the Horse is on the stage and all the spectacle is happening. Then we can pretend we love ourselves. But when it really comes to acting on that self-love, silence, crickets.
Yeah, it's not there, and it's not there. And because they know it's false pride, because they know we don't actually value ourselves, value our family, they can do whatever. They're like, yeah, bring the horse on the stage at the election. What's the problem? They don't care about themselves. No way.
Give her some sugar cubes.
Yeah, like
give the horse some sugar cubes.
Let's take a picture with the horse sticking her tongue out.
Can you stick your tongue out, Mr. Ed or Mrs. Ed? We just calling her what she calls herself.
Right. They don't care about themselves anyway, so why not? And so this is why, even if you do actually you're on one of the few black people who do truly value yourself that live in America, you just want to get out. The only option now, because it's one thing to value yourself and then see white people not value you. It's another thing to value yourself, see white people not value you, and then see your own people not value themselves. That's unbearable. Yeah. That is unbearable, and I refuse to live in a nation where I have to, when I value myself and I have to see reflections of myself that don't value themselves, that's not an option for me. And this is why, one of the reasons why we were like, we have to leave. Right? I got it. Yeah. So if you stay to the end, we said that we were going to give you
a big reveal
on what this election, what's going to happen in this election.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. So the big
she said she's coming to Tanzania. Hey, Karibu sana. Yes. You're going to love it here. Yes. It's the most beautiful country in the world. Yes. And we will never leave Tanzania.
So. And I hope you're coming to live and not just to visit.
Yes.
Because this is a place for living.
This is a place for living.
Not
it really
for visiting.
Is. It really is. Yeah. It really is. So we said we were going to give you our big reveal on what this election was going to look like, right? And so that big reveal is Trump's gonna win. Okay.
Now, how he's gonna win, we can't say precisely.
Go ahead and do your voting, because we know that you're connected to that. Go ahead, put your vote in. Get your aunts, your uncles, your cousins, everybody that you want. Get them to vote. Get a bus of people. Have them all come down and vote for Kamala. But the reality is Kamala is not gonna win.
Yeah.
They know she's not gonna win, and Trump is going to win. And so now the question is, come baby. Oh, it's okay. Come. It's okay. Oh, it's okay. I'm not Shida. It's okay, Mambo. It's okay. Go ahead, Baba.
So, Trump is going to win. And when we say win, we don't just mean the election. We mean he's going to win in every department of, control in the American political system. So what that means is that even if, and this is not based on our study of the numbers or any of that. This is based on our knowledge of how American political history develops. So when people like Trump come about, where he has a kind of popular appeal, when he's speaking to the racial identity of people, when he's showing that he has enemies and he's unafraid to call those enemies out, that person always has the political advantage. Meaning, even if for whatever reason the numbers weren't in his favor, he will use those forms of coercion. Remember, I was talking about leverage. He has an abundance of coercive leverage, meaning he has an abundance of people who will use violence on his behalf, malicious. He has an abundance of people who will use blackmail and bribery on his behalf. He has an abundance of people who will use threats on his behalf.
Right.
So they've already decided, and maybe I think the so-called attempted assassination, that was the breaking point. Once that happened, all other rules went off the table.
Whether it was staged or not.
Whether it was staged or not, because that's not as important as what did his supporters think of that.
They believe it was real.
And as long as they believe it was real, now violence has entered the chat.
Yes.
Okay? So, and now that violence has entered the chat.
It's on the table.
It's on the table. They've chose violence, as people like to say, because they chose violence, that means they're going to win by any means necessary.
Oh, yeah. And at this point, they're not even worried about the election. Like Mama said, they're going to, they've already decided this is going to be our next president.
Yes.
And so this is not going to be a clean, even, respectable transfer of power like the past elections have been. This will not be that. And so if you're expecting that to be the case, you just don't know history, and you're not really doing your due diligence as a so-called citizen of America and understanding where you live.
Yes.
And so the reality is Republicans have already decided.
Yes.
He's their president.
Yes.
He's going to be their president. And Democrats are not as, at least militarily, as vicious as Republicans.
Yeah.
They willing to die for theirs. They already tried it on January 6th. It's nothing for them. And so the question now is, now that you know, we're telling you, the election is not going to matter, right?
It's a formality.
It's a formality.
The election is a formality.
Whoever wins on paper, Trump is going to be the president after November 2024.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so now the question is, what are you prepared to do with that outcome?
Yes.
With your vote for Kamala. Go ahead. Vote for Kamala, vote for Trump, whatever you decide to do. But now that white people who don't value black people are in power, and they've been being given images of black people being vicious, they have already created in their minds this narrative that the black people are the problem in the nation. So that means this is a completely different climate.
And black women are being put forward as the face of the opposition without the black man. So now you have the black woman held up alone without her black man. What you think the white men going to do when they see the black woman standing alone and she's politically opposed to them? You see? That's like, we know what that looks like. On the plantation, what happened? Rape, right?
But this time it ain't gonna be rape. It's just gonna be killing.
Because
they're not, at this point, they're not trying to create no more mulattoes. They're just trying to get rid.
Yes.
They're trying to cleanse.
These are the Gentiles.
They already have a model. They are masters at genocide. These, they're masters at it. This is their forte. So, go ahead. You can read that comment, Baba J.
So, knowing damn well that money they raise is going to them, it's funny because how come we can't come together and raise that money for development in our community?
That's a great question.
Great question. And that just speaks to the fact that political power always grows out of economic power. Meaning, how do you organize yourself economically? That's always going to be the key determinant in terms of how you organize yourself politically. Because people without resources, they have no agenda. Your agenda is based on your ability to accumulate resources and then channel those resources towards the things that you want to accomplish.
Absolutely.
So as black people, we have to develop a more sovereign mindset. And if those resources can't be accumulated in America, then that's a sign that America probably isn't for us. It's always coming back to that, because I know we have enterprising, like very creative black people, But I noticed they always run against these barriers, and it seems as they go up the ladder, they compromise. They have to like make kind of, they got to sell out to white people. So if the cost of success, in quotes, is that we have to become in some way beholden to white people, then that's not a success worth pursuing.
Right.
So yes, we need to accumulate resources, but we have to understand the only way we can accumulate those resources is first by abandoning this concept that America is the kind of ideal place for us to achieve some notion of success. That's far from the truth. In fact,
it really is.
America is opposed to the success
And
of
the
black
inability to come to that conclusion in the right time, at the right time, so that you can get out, is going to cost you a lot more than money.
Yes, it'll cost you your life.
Yeah.
Because again, the stakes of this election are much higher.
Much different.
This is an election where the notions of identity are being pushed forward even before policy.
Yes.
Meaning when you see Kamala, you don't know much about her policy, but you know black woman, black woman, black woman, black woman. When you see Trump,
Megan, that's what you think of. You think of her.
Hotties for Harris.
Yeah.
So, and when you see Trump, what do you think? White man, white man, white man, white man. So the subtext of the entire election is black woman versus white man.
Yeah.
Isolated black woman versus white man with the whole army behind him.
Right.
You see?
Right.
Meaning Trump has an army behind him.
Army.
Kamala has hotties. You see? What happens when a bunch of hotties run into an army? The hotties lose. That's all I'm saying.
And the black women, they're on the front line.
They're on the front line.
And
we should be on the front line.
Right. And I just want people to remind people that Trump beat Hillary. Right?
Yeah.
Trump beat Hillary, which was a white woman. And she actually even had more likeliness of winning because her husband, Bill, was in office at one point. Right? So if Trump can beat a white woman, I just want y'all, because they really got black women convinced that this woman can win. Okay, if Trump could beat a white woman,
he definitely.
How could he lose to a black woman?
Yes, that's just illogical.
And it's Democrats who are literally saying now that they're flipping and turning and voting Republican. So not only do you have, if Hillary couldn't win with the Republican vote. But now you have even less, with the Democratic vote, now you have even less Democrats voting because it's a black woman and you still think she's going to win?
Yes.
Like, they already know she's not. The question is, do you know? And are you going to expel a lot of time and energy trying to get her into something that she was never going to win?
Yes. So the question that we like to pose to our listeners is, are you using your freedom wisely? And when we say freedom, we aren't talking about the so-called constitutional freedoms because those freedoms are fictional. What we're talking about is the freedom that you was born with, the freedom to act and use your agency based on your analysis of the situation. Meaning your freedom to withdraw, your freedom to divest, your freedom to act against if necessary. But the freedom that springs from your own consciousness, are you using that freedom wisely? Because that's the type of freedom that's really going to determine your future. It's not the freedom to vote. It's not the freedom to, love your body.
And it's levels to freedom.
Whatever that is.
It's levels.
It's levels.
So you have the ultimate freedom if you have a passport, if you have the ability to get a passport. You have the ultimate freedom by saying, I'm leaving.
Yes.
That's the biggest freedom that America can give you is the passport.
The freedom to leave.
The freedom to exit.
And that's really the only freedom that distinguishes, because when you think about, because I always say black people in America are slaves. By that I mean black people in America control none of their life-sustaining institutions. And that's not my definition, that's Bobby Wright's definition. And he gave that in the 1980s. So I'm just respecting the ancestor and using his definition of slavery. Slavery is whenever you have a group that doesn't control their life-sustaining institutions. But one thing that's different about modern-day slavery, based on the when you compare it to the slavery that we experienced in the 1800s was in the 1800s, you couldn't leave the plantation.
There wasn't no passport.
There was no passport. You couldn't just leave. But imagine if during that period of slavery in the 1800s, 1700s, black people was leaving the plantation, going up north or going to Canada, and then returning back to the plantation. That's essentially what's happening today with a lot of us, because while the shackles have come off of our body, they've been tightened on our brains.
Man.
You see, so we're in a state of psychological slavery right now. And what we're doing in our coaching on relationships, in our political analysis, is we're trying to encourage people to break those psychological chains. Because once we break those psychological chains, then we can...
That's the real freedom.
Yeah, that's the real freedom. That's the true freedom. Once we break those chains, then we can see, wow, the Constitution, that's like...
And they're really pandering to the reality that you don't really know what freedom is. That's the pandering that they're doing. Because they're talking to you as if you know you're not free.
Yes. Yes.
So what's those comments say? I can't see.
So it says, do y'all know a way to get a passport without a birth certificate?
Yes, it's possible. I don't. I know it's possible. I don't know how to do it, but I know it's possible.
Yes.
Because I've heard of people that have done it.
Yes, it's ways. You just gotta know how to finesse the system.
Maybe reach out to like a notary or someone.
Yeah.
They can maybe advise you on what to do, but it's definitely possible.
Yeah.
But
Fierce Funky Fabulous says, we don't own anything or even run anything worth using or having. Yeah, and see these statements too, like that acknowledgement in and of itself, those types of acknowledgments, I'm sure a lot of us would say that's true. But then we have to ask, what is the outcome of that when you can't leave the environment? Because I know Fierce Funky Fabulous, she's in Tanzania.
Yeah.
But most black people who are still in America, they know that, and then they stay in place. What happens is social defeat.
Yeah.
And social defeat is whenever on repetition you show people images
over and over
of your people being killed,
Yep.
your people being incarcerated, your people being abused and exploited. When you show that on a loop long enough, people start to develop this defeatist mentality, and instead of fighting against their oppressor, they just state what the reality is as though it's just a foregone conclusion, and it's no point of them even trying to resist.
Yeah.
So understand, when we see elections come about, what they're doing is they're trying to emotionally arouse you, but keeping you in that state of social defeat.
Yeah.
Meaning
paralyzing
you'll feel better, but once the rally ends, once the numbers come in and the inauguration begins, you return back to that state of defeat.
Yep.
So what we're trying to say is we need to figure out, how do we push past the propaganda of election so we can have a sustainable esteem about us, so that we know what we can accomplish independently of what's happening in America.
And we know it's not easy because the propaganda is very strong.
Yeah.
But you have to put that effort in.
Yes.
Because it's not just affecting who's going to be in office. It's affecting how we are going to be able to manage relationships.
Right.
Because relationships, black relationships, listen.
Yeah.
It's looking very, very bad.
Right. In relationships, they even, regardless of what the political climate is, it's the quality of your relationship that helps you get through whatever's happening.
Yes.
Meaning, it could be a depression, it could be a recession, it could be some type of pandemic, it can be,
And what happened during the pandemic?
Good question. So during the pandemic, couples were they were forced to stay together in close quarters for extended periods of time, and what they discovered is that the affection that they thought they had for each other was a house of cards. And the closer they was made to be together, the more anxiety, the more stress, the more frustration they was experiencing. And what that shows is that every time something happens in the social space, it's always going to interact with the relationship.
Yep.
So the key is you have to have a strong relationship in order to weather the storm.
Yep. And since the pandemic, black people been on an incline of divorce.
Yes.
It's like you never recovered. Even though the pandemic ended, the black relationship has not recovered.
Yes. And children, they develop mental illnesses because they was in isolation.
Yes.
So we have to focus in on how our relationships are connected to our politics. Our relationships are connected to our social vision.
Yep.
It's not just what we want as individuals. It's what's needed and what's necessary for the family. All right. So we have to be selfless in our politics.
Yes. So what is your plan of action when Trump wins? What is the black person's plan of action? What are you gonna do?
Right.
Because if you're just banking on Kamala winning, and you put all that your eggs in that basket, and you've never even played out the scenario of how vicious and horrific is going to be when Trump wins, you are losing, even if you go and you place your vote.
Yes.
Because the vote is, now that you voted, you feel like, I've done my job, I've done everything I need to do. No, ma'am. You needed to have a plan of action.
Yes.
Because
yes.
this is not going to be like any other election.
Yes.
The transfer of power is not going to be smooth.
No, it's not going to be a peaceful transfer of power.
No. And if you live most black people live in cities surrounded by other cities that hate black people.
Yes.
Like Atlanta. Atlanta is surrounded by a bunch of rural counties and rural cities and towns that don't value them, and it wouldn't take nothing for them to converge. Okay? And I know this sounds like doomsday, like, oh, you thinking of the worst, or you being dramatic.
Alarmist.
Yeah, it's like,
no, and the white media, they've already said it. Look at this movies like Civil War.
It's a whole movie called Civil War that came out in April 2024 of this year.
This year. So,
and it talks about the president being shot.
So this is predictive programming.
Yes.
You know, so whenever you see in the entertainment space, they start talking about Civil War, they start talking about political violence. They're saying this is something that you can expect, you can anticipate in the future.
Yeah.
And all we're saying is, in light of that, what are you doing in order to secure your family when, everything goes, south? When it goes south.
When
it goes south. Because again, when we say Trump is going to win, we aren't talking about the election. Honestly, I don't even think the election is going to make it.
Yeah, he said he don't think it's going to happen.
I don't think it's going to happen. I think most likely what's going to happen is Trump's supporters are going to get so impatient that they're just going to force their way into power.
Yeah.
Before the election even happens, and it's just going to be chaos in the country. And
if you
that
know
happens,
history,
what you going to do about it?
If you know history and you know white people, you've already played out a lot of the scenarios. So because we've studied them and we see how their nations fall and what happens, we can kind of give you a better look into the things that they do when they're in crisis mode. Because the way they operate when they're in crisis mode is different.
Yes.
It's a lot different.
To the caves.
It's back to the caves.
Yeah.
Like the white person that we've been telling y'all about for the past 4 years. Oh, you're going to see that white person.
Yeah.
And it might be too late for you to do a thing about it.
Yeah.
Just being honest.
Yeah.
And so we don't want that fate for our people. Especially people that listen to us and have been following us for some time. We can't, every black person ain't going to hear this message. But the black people, African people who have been following us, at this point, it's like, what are you going to do? You can't just keep listening to us talk. Like,
right.
You can't.
Right.
Because we can't save you. Like, the only thing we can tell you to do is get to safety.
Yes.
Whatever that looks like for you. And it's past time for just sitting around and just listening to us. Because it's like, we not just talking to talk.
Right.
Like,
We're not
we got
entertainers.
babies. We got children. We got children in school. Like, we don't even have to care, but we do. And so at this point, if you value yourself, you value your family, if you want a future family, whether you're single and you desire to be in a relationship and you envision yourself passing your genes and passing your knowledge and wisdom on to another generation, you have to be proactive now in making that plan and getting serious about what America is, where it's about to go, because there's signs. It's just about, are you recognizing those signs? So we hope this video helped. Always feel free to send us an email at indivisible.trust.com or send us a DM if you have any questions.
Yes.
Because we really are invested in relationships thriving, and we know that this attack when it comes to politics is making it a lot harder.
Right. So when the election is over, whenever it ends, your relationship is still going to be there. So you have to say, okay, what am I doing about that? So you have to invest in those things that are going to determine not just what's going to happen in the next 4 years, but what is the rest of your life going to be?
Yeah.
So how are you investing in that?
Yes.
How are you investing in the future of your life with your family? And we're here as relationship investors to help make that decision easier for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So until next time, we'll be going live. Oh wait, someone just wrote a comment on YouTube. Can you read it, Baba?
Please speak on President Ruto / corruption in Africa when you all have a chance. So this video isn't about Africa.
Yeah, it's not.
So, and I don't even like the phrase corruption in Africa because African people, because again, notice we talk, I'll address this quickly. So we talk about corruption because it's interesting.
Because it's a very interesting question.
Who's corrupting the people in Africa? It's usually people in America. So why attack the person who's being corrupted instead of the corruptor? Okay? If you know who the corruptor is, can't you deal with the corruption by attacking the corruptor instead of the corruption, meaning the victim of the corruptor? So
meaning once America's gone,
which is our agenda, there will be no
there'll be less corruption.
There'll be less corruption. By the way, when America falls, so will Europe. Because Europe is America's lackey. So when America falls, Europe will fall with it. So our agenda is we trying to pull out the disease by the root.
Yeah.
We're not trying to just trim at it, because that's what we're doing when we talk about corrupt African leaders. And
it's
Ruto,
just a flex.
Yeah, and Ruto is like, he hasn't been good for the Kenyan people, but that's not our job. Our job is to criticize our enemies, our natural enemies. Ruto isn't our natural enemy,
yes,
but white people are.
Right.
So we pull it out by the root. That's how we can get to the base of what corruption on the African continent is.
Right,
and they even call it neo-colonialism.
They call it that.
You see, where did colonialism come from? It came from white people. So you see, this is just white people 2.0. In a black face.
Yes.
So we're trying to get it at the root.
Yep. So we thank y'all for being here. Thank you for people that joined in on YouTube and people that joined in on Instagram. We'll save the live and you can share it with anyone you know, anyone that is in need of relationship guidance, anyone that is, seeking to be in a healthy relationships and want to relearn and understand what relationships are for and how to manage them and scale them so that they last for generations, right? For a long, long time. What's that comment say, Bob?
This one?
No, the one on Instagram.
Oh, it says cleanse the parasites. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The parasites.
Yeah.
Thank
Perfect
you.
word.
We have a whole video called The Parasitic Nature of White People.
I forgot,
If you desire to watch it. We also have a video called The White Woman is the Devil. And that's also who's really pulling all the strings.
And Kamala, right? 2.0. I mean, Kamala
we think
Harris.
We've been told it's the white man, but
it's the white
why would the devil let us know what he actually looks like?
Yeah.
It's not the white man, it's the white woman.
The devil is a white woman.
Go watch that video if you about that life.
Yeah.
But thank y'all for joining us. We'll see y'all next on Wednesday. We'll be going live again discussing more about relationships.
Yes.
So see y'all until then.
Kwaheri.
Bye-bye.